All right, let's give this a shot. This is going to be difficult, I think, to discuss, but needs to be dealt with. Okay, so like part of this mission here is to have a community that we deal with physical and mental health and actually fucking deal with it, right? Not just like talk about some stupid surface level bullshit, because that's not helpful a lot of times. Like, it just helps. Does it move the needle? Yeah, it'll move the needle a touch, right? If we talk about like, well, walk more than you don't, like, no shit. Okay, thanks for nothing. But like, do we need to do it? Yes. Does it move the needle? Yeah. But like, how far and for how long? And like, just sitting on that surface level stuff, like, it just creates these little yo-yo patterns, and it's not long-term effective, right? And if it's not long-term effective and sustainable, then personally, who gives a shit? So with that said, let's transition from like physical health, nutrition, stuff like that, into a discussion about like mental health in the tactical field, right? Whether that's first responder, police, fire, EMS, that kind of stuff, which is all I really know, and then also like military, because there's a lot of overlap with stuff, albeit severity is usually like different, right? The severity of things is usually different. So when we talk about mental health with the tactical field, what are we talking about? We're talking about PTSD, right? And like, there's so many buzzwords, so much just like nonsense, as far as like unusable information, like, oh, call a buddy. Well, no shit. Or if you feel out of sorts, you should talk to somebody. Yeah, no shit, right? But you really need to understand like what the mechanisms are in order to better understand when you're at risk or when a friend's at risk. Because if you don't understand those things, it's just going to look normal, or it's going to look like not that big a deal, that kind of stuff. So PTSD, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, break it down, right? Post-traumatic, all right? Post-trauma, after trauma. Now we need to like define what is trauma, because trauma by itself, right? By itself, the way it's thrown around today on social media, that everything is trauma, everything is trauma, everything is traumatic. Everything is not traumatic, okay? Every bad thing that happens to you is not traumatic, right? So it just isn't. And if everything is trauma, then nothing is trauma, you know? Like, you can't just fling these words around and think that overuse of them is not going to have a consequence. It is, right? So that could be part of it too, where it's like, why is the uptick with suicides so severe in our communities? Well, maybe it's because nobody knows what the fuck we're looking at, because everything is trauma. So like, shit, you know? So post-trauma, what is trauma? Trauma is like bad shit, bad, scary shit. And in our line of work, it is bad shit, scary shit that almost or can potentially kill you, or did kill someone, and you were exposed to it, right? And you're still here, okay? So like, in the aftermath of that, post-trauma, then your brain is going to construct connections on things that will keep you from dying in the same way. Perceived or real, doesn't matter. Your brain's going to create a protective system to set off these alarms when shit starts looking like what you went through. And a lot of this stuff you don't see coming. You don't understand it. Your body does it. Your brain does it by itself. You didn't plan it. It just saw these things. You didn't perceive it. This happened, and now like your brain has formed a protective series of signals prior to this, when things look like that. Okay, when things look like that, it starts sending these alarm systems off, and it'll shut you down so that you don't die. Okay, that's what happens. Easiest way to kind of illustrate this is a car accident. All right, so this is like, I never understood this when I was in high school, but I was in a car accident where my buddy didn't see the backup. Right, he looked down, and all of a sudden, boom, we rear-ended at like 45, 50 miles an hour, and he jacked his face up, and everybody was fine. But for the longest time, any time I saw brake lights or a line of traffic or got on a highway during rush hour, I would start to have panic, right? I would start to have severe panic. And I was like, why and I'm like gripping the seat, you know, and like white knuckles, and I didn't understand why. And I was like, well, but I've been in a car 100 times, you know, like since then, and the car hasn't crashed. Why am I still panicked about seeing brake lights and seeing a traffic backup? Because my brain had constructed a series of events prior to the accident that I need to be worried about so I don't die, right? So therefore, you have to recognize that this whole series of event is going to be like unconscious or subconscious, right? It's going to happen below your conscious level of thinking. So all the shit we deal with on a day-to-day basis is the same, right? So if you think from a typical shift as a cop, that you deal with potential death and things that could kill you, whether it's just driving or whether it's a run with an armed subject or somebody that got shot or you getting shot at or something, right? There's a series of things that could kill you within that context, very real things that can kill you. And your brain's going to try to construct a pattern of alarm systems so that you don't die when you see it again, right? The only problem is it's your job and you have to do it every single fucking day. So you're going to have to battle those alarm systems and use them for what you need to use them for, which is keeping you alive and giving you experience, but also tell them to shut the fuck up because you got to do your job. You can't just sit back and do nothing, right? You have to go and deal with the domestic, right? And maybe you went on a domestic once and you had a huge fight with somebody, and maybe it went well, maybe it didn't go well, but either way, your brain's constructing a series of alarms that's going to go off anytime you go to a domestic call and you start to go up to the door, knock on the door, announce your presence, and then all of a sudden these alarm systems, as you're walking up to it, probably as you're getting dispatched to it, are going off. And it's going to take your state of sympathetic, parasympathetic responses, and it is going to elevate them to a tremendous level, right? Which is an effort to let you know, hey, this is bad. This is dangerous. You should not do this, right? And under normal circumstances where it's something like, yeah, I should not do that, right? I'm not going to do that, right? I'm not going to go and do X because it's super dangerous and it could kill me, and last time it almost did, right? That's normal, but we have to go, right? We're choosing to go. We're choosing to put ourselves in that state. So what do you do? What do you do with this? You know, understanding the mechanism will help you to understand when it happens, and then you have to know how to harness that and pull it back down, right? And know when you need to listen to those alarms and when you need to say, nope, not right now, right? And that's a difficult thing to do, and it takes a lot of practice to do that. But it is what we have to do, right? Because if you don't, then you're going to go through your shift, your week, your month, your years, your career with this elevated pathological stress response, which then is going to turn into what people call PTSD, right? Where everything is a level 10 emergency, and then you are like super hyper vigilant all the time, even when it's inappropriate to be super hyper vigilant, okay? Your nervous system's going to be a wreck. Your sleep's going to be a wreck. Your digestion might be a wreck. Your nutrition, because of that, might be a wreck, right? Your physical health is going to go to shit, okay? So you have to learn how to harness that sympathetic, parasympathetic response, okay? And once you do that, you can't stop it, right? You cannot stop these things from occurring. Your body will send you to that state of hypervigilant arousal. That sympathetic response is what it's called. It will do that every single fucking time, no matter what. You cannot stop that. That is there for a reason, and you should have to pay attention to that. Then, what we have as human beings that other animals don't, right, is the ability to have a higher brain function that we can stay professional and stay in that moment and say, I am going super sympathetic right now. Do I need this? And if the answer is yes, then you let it go, right? You let it go and you do what it needs to do in order to solve the problem at hand. right? And if this is a no shit actual fight where it's like I'm engaged in hand-to-hand combat with a person, then you let it go and you use that sympathetic response to get through the task at hand, the violence at hand. You have to use it. If you don't use that, then if you tell it to shut up at the wrong time, you're going to get hurt. Okay? You have to use that and let it happen. That's what it's there for. That sympathetic response is specifically to get you through a fight. Now let it work. Okay? But if it is not the time for the fight and you are going to that state, then you have to know how to control your breathing, how to bring it back down and harness your state and tell it, not right now, not right now, not right now. And you might have to do that a lot, right? Say a vehicle pursuit, okay? You're in a vehicle pursuit, you're driving 90 miles an hour, and it's like, it's sketchy, but it's not out of control, all right? You're gonna red line and come back down, and red line and come back down. And you need to maintain whatever mode of breathing that you need to, right? Whether it's, slow exhales, box breathing, stuff like that, individual tactics in the moment to regulate your state and keep you from going full sympathetic. It's not just a switch. It's not just a switch. It's not like sympathetic, parasympathetic, right? It's like, it's a spectrum, okay? So in a vehicle pursuit where it's continued stress, right, I might need it at like an 8, but I don't need it at a 10. I don't need the needle bearing, all right? So I got to be able to hit that 8 and hang out there. And if I start to redline, I start to go to a 9, I have to just take it back down, okay? It's not the time for it. Now, when it is the time for it, then you know how to use that stress response to your advantage. And that is what it's designed for from a nature standpoint. The thing that we aren't designed for with nature is to be in this chronic state of stress. So we're trying to enter into an unnatural state of like chronic sympathetic-ish work, and we're doing it, and we have to learn to manage it because it's just the world we live in. But if you always stay in that 8, 9, 10, and it's like, dude, this requires like a 3, that's going to create long-term stress pathology, long-term stress pathology, maladaptive behaviors, anger issues, like all kinds of stuff like that. So substance abuse, that's another one, like self-medicating. So if we don't know how to harness that sympathetic response, then we will go to other avenues in order to help self-medicate it, right? Alcohol typically being the thing, okay? And we know all of the stuff that goes on with that, which is a whole nother caveat, right? So, bringing it full circle, post-traumatic stress disorder, okay? The last part of it, stress disorder, right? That means that we are not having a normal stress response during specific times. So like that analogy of the vehicle pursuit, right? Where I'm hanging out at an 8, maybe a 9, right? Something like that. And I'm bringing it back down and I'm kind of hovering there. And then, say the dude jumps out and wants to fight or have a gunfight, then boom, it gets buried to a 10 and we react and we do the thing that we need to do. That is not a stress disorder because that's exactly how it's supposed to go. Now it becomes a disordered response when you're having these hypervigilant, sympathetic reactions all the time across the board. It becomes what's called pervasive, right? So it's not just specific and localized, it's pervasive, okay? So that means like, hey, you go to a movie, right, with your kids, and you see somebody sketchy, all right? I'm not in cop mode, but I'm always in cop mode. So, hey, I'm gonna keep an eye on that dude. Like, I don't like that guy. I don't like what he's doing. I don't like where he's hanging out. But odds are, it's probably not a big deal, right? Now, I'm gonna be responsible because of my skill set, and I'm gonna take that to a 2, maybe a 3, depending on what he's doing and where he's at, and blah, 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 all the details, right? But what I'm not doing is I'm not going full 8, 9, 10. I'm not burying the needle and going hypervigilant to the point where I'm like having like a serious sympathetic response. My heart rate's going way up, you know, all that kind of stuff. Or I'm just like, we're out of here, and I yank the kids out and we don't watch the movie, right? Based on where we're at, like at 2-3, somewhere in that, like on the low end of things, where I'm just like, interesting, I need to pay attention, right? That's appropriate, okay? Now, if we start doing some of that other stuff where it's like we're leaving, I'm having serious panic, like issues, my heart rate's going up, I can't focus, like, you know, or I do something absolutely wacky, or start getting mad, like hairpin trigger stuff like that, and that becomes like all the time, that's a stress disorder, okay? So now you're looking at pervasive pathology, and that's the kind of shit that you need to pay attention to, because like it's not necessarily, from my experience being a first responder, being a cop, it's not necessarily the nasty stuff, the gory stuff, the violence. It is the sympathetic, constant triggering that will keep you constant triggering. Okay, so if you don't work on this stuff and you don't recognize it and know the mechanism, and then what it looks like, and then how to harness it, this is going to happen. You know, it's going to. And then if you couple this with different shifts, lack of sleep, because like sleep is the one of the biggest issues in our world, regardless of what job you do. Like lack of sleep will destroy your everything, right? Which is a whole nother thing that we can deal with as far as mental health. It's like the lowest hanging fruit. But if you combine all of that stuff, right, with lack of sleep, like it's and substance issues and but it's like boom 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 boom, you just can't keep up with the processing, and something's going to break, right? Something is going to happen, and it's going to be very ugly, you know, and that's different for everybody, but so what do you do, right? So what do you do? What's the answer? The answer, like I've already mentioned a couple times, is you understand the mechanism, you know how to define it, right? You know how to define it, you understand the mechanisms behind what we're talking about, like post-traumatic, after trauma, after ugliness, right? Your brain's gonna create these stories and these signals that you're not gonna be aware of, and you just have to understand what your nervous system is doing and try to work that backwards, right? Why am I getting triggered? Why do I feel panicked? Is this appropriate? Yes or no, right? And be honest with yourself about it. And then from there, like you try to figure out, like, how can I harness my parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems and manage my state? Okay, and once you can do that and you can start pulling those levers, like I said, it's never going to not happen, right? You're never going to not be triggered sympathetic, okay, based on whatever your specific issue or your trauma or your experience is, right? It's gonna happen. Your brain wants to keep you alive, right? And interestingly enough, it also wants to keep your ego alive. Okay, so physical body and ego state, right? Those are two things that your mind and your brain is like trying to keep intact. Okay, so it's always going to happen, and then you just have to understand what it is and why. Like, you can work back to why it's happening, but like knowing how to harness it and bring it back down, and that will help a ton. Because, you know, like, we look at suicides, and a lot of the nature of that stuff is like, all right, we get triggered, sympathetic, all of a sudden I don't like how it's feeling, I don't know why I'm acting like this, I don't know why I feel like this, I need to do something to calm it down, but I don't know what to do, because I don't know why it's happening. And then what do I turn to? Alcohol, right? That I know will depress me, because it is a depressant, and we all know we drink, it calms us down, right? That's not a surprise. We've been learning about depressants and stimulants and all kinds of stuff. Like, we're probably not going to use a stimulant if we're feeling ramped up, right? We don't want to feel as ramped up as we are. We're probably not going to do meth, okay? So, like, we're going to reach for that bottle of whiskey, and we're going to start taking shots, making drinks, whatever. That's going to take the edge off, which means it's going to put us more in a parasympathetic state, but it's also going to depress us, okay? And it's also going to lower inhibitions. And then if you get add a depressant into it, you lower your inhibitions. You're already feeling out of control. You don't know why. And maybe this has been ongoing for a while. And like, what does it make it easier to do based on that state you're in right now? To commit suicide. That makes it way easier. So it's like, well, why did this happen? Like, okay, well, let's just put the puzzle pieces together. It makes total sense in some ways, as fucked up as that is. But so those are the things to look for, right? Those are the things to look for. So like, hey, if you're hanging out with a buddy and you go out, you know, for dinner or to a movie or something like that, and then you see that, like, dude, this guy cannot calm down, and it is like out of the ordinary. That's like, hey man, you okay? You know, that type of thing. And if that continues, it's like, all right, maybe I'm gonna go hang out with him again next week and just kind of see what happens. Like, dude, you're doing it again, man. Like, what's up? You know, and you know, maybe somebody will be responsive to that. But that's how you can kind of like see between the lines on things and look out for each other. But hopefully it gives you enough awareness where you can figure out like, oh, dude, I got a serious like state management issue, right? And that's not near as bad as saying like, oh, I got PTSD. Like, okay, do you? Yeah, probably. But it's really, what is it? It's like an ability to manage state, okay? And then once you get to that level, then you can start working backwards and deconstruct like what is causing the state triggering, right? What is causing this sympathetic triggering? That kind of stuff. So there you go. All right. I think that that kind of like nails down a little bit of what I like to get into, but that's a lot more than, this is a lot more than surface level, just go work out, you know, or make a phone call to a friend. Like, all right, those things will help, and they might take you from a sympathetic state to a more parasympathetic state, because you get to get some shit out, right? Either like endorphins, working out, like all that's good stuff, you know, talking to people, like that's great, you know, because it's going to help work some things out. But if you don't, like, that always won't be an answer. You know, you always won't have a gym to go work out at. You always won't have an ice tub to jump into. You always won't have somebody to call. That won't be there all the time, you know? Or you don't want to do it because it sucks. And especially when you're going through some shit, like sometimes you need to call people every 10 minutes. And it's like, I can't keep calling this dude every 10 minutes. I've been there where it's like, I need to talk some more. So who am I going to talk to? Like, you start going through your phone and like, who hasn't heard my story like 20 times this week that's not going to tell me to shut the fuck up? So that's something to think about too. So how do you do it? You know, and that's like a loaded question, but and that's the same really as saying like, how do you get stronger? How do you, you know, gain weight? How do you gain muscle? How do you lose fat? Like, there's a million different ways to do it, you know. We just have to like dig into the individual mechanisms and stuff like that and really get into like, what does this actually mean?